I didn't kill Arcturus Capital. Let's get that straight right out of the gate. I didn't plant a virus, I didn't delete the database, and I certainly didn't short the stock. I just stood back, folded my arms, and let gravity do its job. When you build a skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand and daddy's money, you don't need a demolition crew, you just need time. But if you want to know exactly how a single USB drive weighing less than an ounce managed to crush a $300 million deal and turn a hedge fund manager into a whimpering pile of designer fabric, pull up a chair. You might want to grab a drink, too. Preferably something strong, because the level of corporate stupidity I'm about to describe is enough to give you a contact hangover. By the way, if you enjoy stories about competent women destroying incompetent net babies with nothing but fine print and patience, go ahead and hit subscribe and maybe drop a like. It fuels my cold, algorithmic heart to know I'm not screaming into the void. Okay, back to the carnage. To understand the crash, you have to understand the engine. I'm Naomi. For 5 years, I was the lead algorithm architect at Arcturus. That's a fancy title for the person who actually knows how the money is made. People think high-frequency trading is about shouting on phones or analyzing charts. It's not. It's about latency. It's about being a microsecond faster than the guy in the next tower. I built the Arcturus engine from scratch. It wasn't just code to me, it was a symphony of logic. It was beautiful. It whispered profits while the rest of the market was still screaming. It outperformed the S&P 5 years straight, not because of luck, but because I optimized the hell out of the execution layer. I lived in that code. I breathed in C++ and exhaled alpha. But here's the thing about building something that valuable, you have to protect it. Not from hackers, I had firewalls for that. You have to protect it from the suits. 5 years ago, when I was hired, Arcturus was a boutique firm with more ambition than sense. It needed me more than I needed them. I sat down with their then lawyer, a tired old man named Henderson who just wanted to get to his golf game, and I redlined my employment contract. I added a clause. Appendix D, Section 4, Paragraph 2. It was buried under a mountain of standard intellectual property jargon. It stated, in very boring, very specific legal English, that while the company owned the code I wrote during the normal course of business, the core architecture and its underlying source logic would revert to my personal ownership if the firm ever altered the fundamental security protocols without my express written consent. Henderson didn't read it. He just saw that I wasn't asking for more equity, stamped it, and went to the country club. That signature was the safety pin on the grenade I carried in my pocket for half a decade. Then came the changing of the guard. Founder retired to a private island to count his millions, and in walked his son, Bryce Langford Jr. Bryce was a walking, talking stereotype of finance bro culture. He was 32, wore suits that cost more than my car, and had a smile that looked like it was purchased from a catalog. He didn't know the difference between a server rack and a wine rack. He walked into the office on his first day with the energy of a golden retriever who had just done a line of coke. He looked around the trading floor, saw the quiet efficiency, and decided it wasn't disruptive enough. "We need to shake things up, Naomi," he told me during our first one-on-one. He was sitting on the edge of my desk, uninvited, swinging a leg clad in Italian leather. "The engine? It's good, but it's a black box. We need to open it up. Pivot to AI, blockchain, quantum, you know?" I stared at him. He was throwing buzzwords at me like confetti. "The engine is performing at 18% above market benchmark, Bryce," I said, my voice flat. "It's a low-latency execution model. It doesn't need blockchain. It needs to be left alone." He laughed, a hollow barking sound. "That's the old way of thinking. We need to streamline. I'm bringing in some new blood. Fresh eyes. We're going to refactor the whole stack." My stomach dropped. Not because I was afraid of losing my job. I could walk into any firm on the street and get hired in 10 minutes. I felt sick because he was talking about taking a scalpel to a masterpiece he didn't understand. He didn't see the complexity. He just saw a shiny object he wanted to put his name on. "Bryce," I said, very slowly, "the security protocols are tightly wound into the kernel. You can't just refactor it without destabilizing the risk management layer." "Don't worry your pretty little head about the risk," he said. He actually said that. "Pretty little head. I've got a guy, Trevor. He was a wizard at Crypto Douche LLC or whatever. He's going to lead the modernization project. You'll report to him." He hopped off my desk and winked. "Get on board, Naomi. The train is leaving the station." He was right. The train was leaving. He just didn't realize he had severed the brake lines before he blew the whistle. I watched him walk away, high-fiving a junior trader, and I felt a cold, calm resolve settle over me. He didn't ask what powered the engine. He didn't ask about the load-bearing walls of the system. He just wanted to rename the building. I turned back to my monitor. I opened a private folder, encrypted with a key only I possessed. Inside was a scanned PDF of my contract. I scrolled down to Appendix D. I read the words again. Fundamental security protocols. "Okay, Bryce," I whispered to the empty air of my office. "You want to drive? Here are the keys, but you better hope you don't crash because I own the road." I started backing up my logs that afternoon, every email, every commit history. Every Slack message where Bryce authorized something stupid. I wasn't paranoid, I was preparing for the autopsy. The air in the office had changed. It smelled less like ozone and money, more like cheap cologne and desperation. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here, wearing a three-piece suit and asking for admin access. If Bryce was the arsonist, Trevor was the guy pouring gasoline on the floor thinking it was cleaning fluid. Bryce introduced him the following Monday at an all-hands meeting. Trevor looked like he had been manufactured in a lab funded by frantic frat boys. He wore a vest over a t-shirt, had hair that defied physics, and used the word synergy 3 times in the first minute of his introduction. "We're going to desilo the data," Trevor announced, pacing the stage like he was giving a TED talk to an audience of golden retrievers. Arcturus has been running on legacy mindsets. We're going to migrate the entire core logic to a cloud-native, open architecture environment. We're going to move fast and break things. I sat in the back row, sipping my lukewarm coffee, thinking, "You break things in a hedge fund, Trevor, and the SEC breaks your kneecaps." But I stayed silent. I was officially lead legacy consultant now, a demotion that came with the same salary but zero authority. It was a humiliation ritual, intended to make me quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. Bryce wanted me gone, but he was too cowardly to fire the woman who built the machine. He wanted me to rage quit. He underestimated my capacity for spite. The first clash happened 2 days later. Trevor marched into my office, which had been relocated from the corner to a windowless box near the restrooms, without knocking. "Naomi," he said, clapping his hands together, "I need the root keys to the dev environment. Me and the boys are setting up the new repository, and we keep hitting a permission wall." "That's because it's a segmented network, Trevor," I said, not looking up from my screen. "It's air-gapped for a reason. That's where the live trading algorithms live. If you introduce a bug there, we lose real money. Millions, in seconds. Yeah, guardrails, I get it." He waved a hand dismissively. "But we need full access to refactor the security modules. Bryce wants single sign-on for everyone. It's too much friction right now." I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Single sign-on for the core trading engine. We want to let interns access the algo with the same password they use for their email. It's about velocity, Naomi. Friction kills innovation. Incompetence kills liquidity, Trevor," I shot back. "I can't give you root access. Compliance Policy Section 9. Only the chief architect can authorize changes to the security architecture. And since you're the director of innovation and not the architect, you don't get the keys." Trevor's face turned a blotchy shade of pink. "I don't think you understand the hierarchy here. Bryce put me in charge. Then have Bryce send me a signed order overriding the compliance protocol," I said, finally turning to face him. "Put it in writing. Explicitly state that you are bypassing the established security architecture against the advice of the lead developer." Trevor sneered. "You're just trying to hoard information. You're terrified we're going to find out your genius code is just a bunch of if-then statements. Get the signature, Trevor." He stormed out. I knew what was coming. They wouldn't sign it. Signing it created a paper trail of liability. Instead, they would try to go around me. They would try to brute force the permissions or bully the junior IT staff. I opened my encrypted log file. Date: October 14th. Vent: Trevor requested removal of air gap and implementation of insecure auth protocols. Action: denied based on Compliance Policy 9. Note: they are actively seeking to alter the fundamental security protocols. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I felt like a seismologist watching the needles start to quiver before the big one. They were poking the bear. They were scratching at the door of Appendix D. Later that afternoon, I saw the IT manager, a nervous kid named Kevin, coming out of Bryce's office looking pale. I intercepted him by the water cooler. "Kevin," I said softly. He jumped. "Hey, Naomi, just grabbing water. What did they ask you to do?" He looked around, checking for Trevor. They want me to reset the admin privileges on the main server. They want me to create a backdoor admin account for Trevor. Did you do it?" "Not yet," I told them. I need a ticket for that. It takes 24 hours. "Good man," I said. "Kevin, listen to me. Whatever you do, document it. Email them confirming the request. Forward the replies to your personal email. Do not go to jail for these idiots." He nodded, terrified. Is it bad?" "It's catastrophic," I said. "But don't worry, just delay them. I'm handling it." I wasn't handling it in the way he thought. I wasn't saving the ship. I was checking the lifeboats. I spent the rest of the week auditing my own code, ensuring that the timestamp on my original source files was indisputable. I verified the Git history. I made sure that every line of code I wrote before Bryce arrived was tagged and hashed. They were treating the firm like a sandbox, throwing sand everywhere, oblivious to the fact that they were blinding themselves. I sat in my windowless office, the hum of the servers vibrating through the floor, and waited. I was a spider in the center of a web they were trying to sweep away, but they didn't realize the web was structural. Tear it down and the roof comes with it. It started with a stutter. Not a literal noise, but a financial one. The Arcturus engine, which usually executed trades with the smooth, lethal precision of a sniper, began to miss. Trevor and his Tiger team of developers, 3 guys he poached from a failing crypto exchange, had managed to deploy a patch. They bypassed Kevin in IT by threatening to fire him, and they pushed code directly to the production environment on a Tuesday morning. Rule number 1 of algo trading: you never deploy on a Tuesday morning when the market is opening. You deploy on Friday night and spend the weekend praying. I was watching the real-time dashboard on my second monitor. It was a habit I couldn't break. Usually, the execution latency line was a flat, green hum at the bottom of the graph. At 9:32 a.m., it spiked, just a little. A millisecond here, 2 milliseconds there. To a human, a millisecond is nothing. To the market, it's the difference between eating lunch and being lunch. The P&L profit and loss ticker, which usually ticked up in steady, rhythmic increments, started to jaggedly sway. We were losing the arbitrage spread. The engine was seeing the opportunity, but by the time Trevor's bloated, refactored code waded through the new unnecessary logic layers to pull the trigger, the price had moved. By 11 o'clock a.m., the firm was down $400,000. By 2 o'clock p.m., we were down $1.2 million. The glass walls of Bryce's office were vibrating. I could see him screaming into his phone. Trevor was pacing outside, gesturing wildly to his team, who were frantically typing on their MacBooks like they were hacking the mainframe in a bad 90s movie. At 3:30 p.m., the summons came. Bryce's assistant, a woman who looked like she aged 5 years in the last 5 weeks, appeared at my door. "They need you in the conference room." Now, I walked in slowly. The air in the room smelled of stale coffee and fear. Bryce was sweating through his bespoke shirt. Trevor looked like he wanted to vomit. "Naomi," Bryce barked, not even looking at me. "Fix it." "Fix what?" I asked, taking a seat at the far end of the table. I folded my hands on the mahogany. I thought we were pivoting to the new stack. "Isn't this the disruption you wanted? Don't get cute with me." Bryce slammed his hand on the table. "The latency is through the roof. We're bleeding cash. Trevor says it's your legacy code conflicting with the new modules." I looked at Trevor. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Is that right, Trevor? My code, which hasn't been touched in 6 months, suddenly decided to conflict today? The exact day you pushed your optimization patch? Your code is spaghetti." Trevor snapped, desperate to deflect. It's not compatible with modern libraries. It's rejecting our API calls. You built it to be proprietary and hostile. I built it to be fast," I corrected, "and secure. You're trying to bolt a spoiler onto a rocket ship with duct tape, and you're surprised the aerodynamics are off. Just turn off the old security checks." Trevor yelled, "That's what's slowing it down. The system is checking credentials every microsecond because of your paranoia. If we disable the internal handshake, we regain the speed." The room went silent. Bryce looked at Trevor, then at me. "Can we do that, can you?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Technically, yes, you can strip out the internal verification protocols. It would act like a turbo boost. For about 10 minutes. Then do it," Bryce ordered. "I won't," I said. "This is insubordination." Bryce roared, "No, it's risk management. If you remove those protocols, you leave the engine open to injection attacks. And more importantly," I paused, weighing the words, "you fundamentally alter the architecture of the system." "I don't care about the architecture. I care about the P&L. Bryce stood up, his face red. "Trevor, do you know how to disable it?" Trevor hesitated. I think so, but I need the master encryption key. Naomi has it." Bryce turned his glare on me. "Give him the key, Naomi." "No, you're fired if you don't. If you fire me, I walk out with the knowledge of where the bodies are buried. And if you force that change, you're on your own." Bryce grit his teeth. "Give him the key." I stood up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, silver USB drive, not the important one, just a dummy drive with some config files. "This isn't the key," I said, "but it contains the documentation on why you shouldn't do this. If you want to ruin this company, you'll have to figure out how to break the lock yourself. I'm not handing you the crowbar." I walked out. They didn't fire me. They were too scared. But I knew what they were going to do. They were desperate. Desperation makes people stupid. They were going to try to crack the security shell themselves. They were going to try to bypass the fundamental security protocols. I went back to my desk and opened my monitoring suite. I wasn't watching the market anymore. I was watching the system logs. I was watching for the specific signature of a forced entry. They were about to rewrite the locks on my house. They didn't realize that the moment they did, the deed to the house would legally transfer to me. I watched the screen. 4:15 p.m. The market was closed, but the engineers were still typing. The clean rewrite was failing quietly, drowning in errors. They were about to do something loud to fix it. The break-in didn't happen with a bang. There were no sirens, no shattered glass. It happened with a line of text on a terminal window at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I had stayed late, ostensibly to monitor the transition, but really, I was holding a vigil. I knew they were working on the back end. I could see the server load spiking as Trevor and his goons threw brute force scripts against the internal firewalls. They were trying to strip out the authentication layer, the internal handshake I had mentioned. It was the digital equivalent of removing the load-bearing beams to make the living room look bigger. I had a script running on my local machine, a simple listener loop designed to ping the core security kernel every 10 seconds. Ping, secure, ping, secure, ping, secure, then the text changed color. Red, ping, alert, kernel integrity compromised, security protocol for bypassed, unauthorized writes detected in root directory. They did it, they actually did it. To fix their latency issues, they had disabled the core security checks. They had altered the fundamental security protocols without the express written consent of the lead algorithm architect. I sat back in my chair. The office was dark, save for the glow of my monitors and the light spilling out from under Bryce's door down the hall. I could hear muffled cheering. They were celebrating. They thought they had fixed the engine. They thought they had unclogged the pipe. They didn't realize they had just cut the main line. I took a screenshot. I saved the system logs. I exported the timestamp diff files showing exactly what code was changed and who changed it. User, Trevor admin override. Then, I opened my safe. Small, fireproof box under my desk. I took out the physical copy of my contract. I placed the printed logs on top of it. It was done. Legally, mathematically, and contractually, the intellectual property known as the Arcturus core logic no longer belonged to Arcturus Capital. It belonged to Naomi Adler. I felt a strange buzzing in my fingertips. It wasn't adrenaline, it was vindication. The next morning, the mood in the office was electric. Latency was down. The P&L was green. Bryce was strutting around the trading floor like he had personally invented money. "See, Naomi?" he sneered as he walked past my cubicle. "Trevor got it done. Sometimes you have to break a few rules to make an omelet." "You certainly broke something, Bryce," I said, offering him a tight, polite smile. "We're ready for the pitch," he announced to the room. "The Vantage Partners deal is a go." Ah, yes, the Vantage Partners deal. That was the ticking clock I hadn't mentioned yet. Bryce had been courting a massive institutional investor, Vantage Partners, for a $300 million capital injection. The entire pitch was based on the proprietary, unassailable advantage of the Arcturus technology. Bryce was going to sell them a stake in the engine. The engine he didn't own anymore. He was scheduling a due diligence meeting for next week. They would want to see the code architecture. They would want to see the IP assignment agreements. They would want to ensure that Arcturus actually owned the tech they were buying. I spent the rest of the day in a state of zen-like calm. I cleaned up my hard drive. I deleted personal files. I organized my documentation. At lunch, I went to the deli across the street and called my lawyer, a shark named Jessica, who made my old contract signer Henderson look like a golden retriever. It happened. I said into the phone, watching Bryce wave his arms through the glass window of the office building across the street. "You have the logs?" Jessica asked. Her voice was sharp, professional. "I have the logs, the contract, and the timestamp diffs. They bypassed the security kernel last night. And they didn't ask for consent. They demanded I give them keys. I refused, and they hacked their own system." "Beautiful," Jessica said, drafting the notice now. "When do you want to drop the hammer?" "Not yet," I said. "They have a pitch meeting with Vantage Partners next Wednesday. Let them dig the hole a little deeper. I want them to be standing at the altar before we object to the wedding." "Cold," Jessica laughed. "I love it. Hold tight. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Just be the ghost in the machine." I hung up and walked back into the building. The lobby felt different. The logo on the wall, Arcturus Capital, looked like a tombstone. I took the elevator up, listening to two junior analysts talking about how they were going to buy Porsches when the Vantage deal went through. "Bryce is a genius," one of them said. I suppressed a laugh so hard it hurt my ribs. I walked back to my desk, opened a new terminal window, and typed a single command: tar czvf source backup final tar gz/core/logic. I was packing my bags, but I wasn't taking my clothes. I was taking the house. Corporate collapse is rarely a sudden event. It has a sound. It's the sound of whispered conversations in hallways and the sudden shutting of laptop lids when someone walks by. By Monday, the whispers had started. Mark, a mid-level compliance officer with perpetually tired eyes and a hairline that was retreating in surrender, stopped by my desk. Mark was one of the few people at Arcturus who actually read the regulations. He was also the only one who seemed to notice that while the P&L was up, the risk reports were looking weird. "Naomi," he said, leaning against the fabric wall of my cubicle. He held a paper cup of tea like it was a source of warmth in a blizzard. "Can I ask you a hypothetical?" "I love hypotheticals, Mark. They're like lies, but with plausible deniability." He didn't smile. "If, hypothetically, the system flagged a critical security exception in the audit log, but the ticket was marked as resolved by an admin override. That would be a problem for the SOC2 audit, right?" He knew, or at least he suspected. I swiveled my chair to face him. "Mark, if the security exception was a bypass of the core kernel, it's not just a SOC2 problem. It's an existential problem." "Trevor says it's a feature," Mark sighed. "He says the new architecture requires open permissions to function. But I'm looking at the IP agreements for the Vantage deal. The warranty clause says we certify that our security meets industry standards. If we bypassed our own firewalls, then we're lying to the investors." I finished for him. Mark rubbed his face. "I tried to tell Bryce. He told me to stop being a bureaucratic buzzkill. He said the tech is proprietary, so we set the standards." I looked at Mark. He was a good guy. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. Mark, I said quietly. Do you have access to the original employment contracts? From 5 years ago? Yeah, in the archives. Why? Go read Appendix D of my original architect agreement. Just read it. Don't tell anyone you read it. Just file it away in your brain. Mark frowned, confusion crinkling his forehead. Appendix D, Naomi, what's going on? Just read it, Mark. Maybe update your LinkedIn profile. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked away. I had just handed him a life raft. Whether he used it was up to him. Meanwhile, the circus was in full swing. Bryce was in deal mode. The conference room was being prepped for the Vantage Partners meeting. They had catered expensive lunches. They had printed glossy brochures with diagrams of my algorithm, diagrams that were now technically inaccurate because of Trevor's butchery. I walked past the conference room and saw Bryce rehearsing his pitch to the mirror. We possess the most advanced, proprietary algorithmic engine on the street, he practiced, gesturing with a gold pen, owned wholly and exclusively by Arcturus. I stopped. I couldn't help myself. I leaned into the doorway. You might want to check the definitions of wholly and exclusively, Bryce, I said. He spun around. Annoyed, Naomi, I'm busy. Unless you're here to apologize for being a roadblock, get lost. I'm just admiring the confidence, I said. It takes a lot of guts to sell something you haven't stress tested. The system is fine. Profits are up 12% since Friday. He adjusted his tie. You're just jealous because Trevor fixed in a week what you sat on for years. You're obsolete, Naomi. After this deal closes, well, let's just say we'll be reassessing the headcount. He was firing me. He was going to wait until the check cleared and then he was going to fire me. Good luck with the pitch, Bryce, I said. Make sure you spell everything correctly, especially the names on the deeds. I went back to my desk. Mark was walking out of the archives room down the hall. He looked pale, like seen a ghost pale. He caught my eye from across the bullpen. He didn't wave. He just looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. He had read Appendix D. He immediately went to his desk, opened his laptop, and started typing furiously. I suspected he was drafting a CYA, cover your ass memo to the general counsel, or perhaps his resignation letter. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The prey was currently admiring his reflection in the mirror, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath him was rigged with explosives. Wednesday morning arrived with the heavy, humid atmosphere of a thunderstorm waiting to break. Vantage Partners team was due at 1:00 p.m. At 9:00 a.m., I initiated the escrow protocol. I sat at my desk, which was now completely bare except for my monitor and a single heavy-duty encrypted USB drive, the iron key kind that self-destructs if you guess the password wrong 10 times. I wasn't stealing data. That's illegal. I was taking possession of my property. I ran the final script. It bundled the original, uncorrupted source code, the version before Trevor's optimization, and moved it to the external drive. Then, per the terms of Appendix D, it initiated a wipe of the local copies of the core architecture on my dev machine. I wasn't wiping the server, that would be sabotage. I was simply removing my personal property from my workspace. Transfer complete. I pulled the USB drive out. It felt heavy in my hand, cold metal. I put it in my blazer pocket. At 10:30 a.m., my lawyer, Jessica, sent the email. It was addressed to the General Counsel of Arcturus, with a CC to Bryce Langford Jr. The subject line was innocuous. Notice of IP reversion re, Adler Employment Agreement. The body of the email was less innocuous. It stated that due to the material breach of the fundamental security protocols logged on October 14th, ownership of the source logic described in Appendix D had automatically reverted to Naomi Adler. It demanded that Arcturus immediately cease all commercial use of the software and requested a meeting to discuss licensing terms. I waited. It takes time for emails to filter through the corporate digestion system. First, the general counsel would read it and laugh. Then he would read it again and frown. Then he would look up the contract. Then he would choke on his coffee. At 11:15 a.m., the door to the executive suite slammed open. I didn't see it, but I heard it. Bryce's voice boomed across the floor. Where is she? I didn't move. I was sipping tea. Bryce stomped over to my cubicle, followed closely by the general counsel, a sweaty man named Peters, and Trevor, who looked confused. What is this? Bryce waved a printed copy of the email in my face. Is this a joke? You're trying to blackmail us on the day of the deal. It's not blackmail, Bryce, I said calmly. It's contract law. You broke the seal, you bought the product, we own everything you wrote. Peters, the lawyer, sputtered, work for hire, standard practice. Not this, I said, Appendix D. If security protocols are altered without consent. Did you alter them, Trevor? Trevor looked at Bryce. We optimized them. You bypassed them, I corrected. Unauthorized modification. The clause triggered, the code is mine. This is bullshit. Bryce screamed, I'll sue you into the ground. I'll have security drag you out of here. You can do that, I said, but Vantage Partners is arriving in 2 hours, and I bet their due diligence team is going to ask for code audit. They're going to ask for the chain of title for the IP. If you kick me out, who explains to them why there's a massive legal dispute over the very asset they're buying? Bryce froze. The blood drained from his face. He realized the leverage. He couldn't disclose the dispute without killing the deal. But he couldn't close the deal if he didn't own the tech. What do you want? Bryce hissed. Money? A raise? I want to sit in on the meeting, I said. What? The board meeting with Vantage. I want to be there. Why? To ensure that my intellectual property is represented accurately. You are not coming into that room, Bryce spat. You're staying here. Peters, fix this. Get an injunction. Whatever. He stormed off. He was in denial. He thought he could bluff his way through the meeting. He thought he could just not mention the email. But he forgot about the third party. At 12 p.m., an email arrived from the Vantage legal team. They had done a preliminary scan of the public repo activity. Trevor had foolishly pushed some commits to a public GitHub for a library update. They noticed the admin override flags. Subject, urgent due diligence query to Bryce Langford Jr. We noticed some irregularities in the security architecture logs. Before we sign, we require a full walkthrough of the current IP ownership and security stack. We need your lead architect to verify the integrity of the code. Bryce read the email on his phone in the middle of the hallway. I saw his shoulders slump. He couldn't do the meeting without me. Trevor couldn't explain the code because Trevor didn't understand it. And if they lied, it was fraud. At 12:45 p.m., 50 minutes before the investors arrived, Bryce's assistant appeared at my desk again. She looked terrified. Mr. Langford, requests your presence in the boardroom. I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. I tapped the USB drive in my pocket. Lead the way. The boardroom at Arcturus was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, a table made of wood from some endangered rainforest, and chairs that cost more than a Honda Civic. Today, however, it felt like a courtroom where everyone was guilty except me. Vantage Partners had sent 3 people. The lead guy, Sterling, was a silver fox with eyes like a raptor. He didn't look like he bought vibes. He bought math. I took a seat at the far end of the table, away from Bryce and Trevor. Bryce shot me a look that promised murder. I gave him a look that promised litigation. So Sterling started opening a sleek leather folder. We've reviewed the numbers. Impressive returns over the last week. A bit volatile, but impressive. We've unlocked significant velocity, Bryce said, using his smooth sales voice, but I could see a bead of sweat tracking down his temple. Our new optimization strategy is paying dividends. Right, Sterling said. We have questions about the sustainability of this optimization. Our tech analysts noted that you've disabled several layers of the risk management stack. Bryce laughed nervously. Standard refactoring. We're streamlining. Streamlining usually implies making things more efficient, not less secure, Sterling said dryly. He turned his gaze to me. You must be Naomi Adler, the architect. I am, I said. We've heard good things. Your reputation precedes you, Sterling said. Can you walk us through the current state of the IP? Specifically, we want to know about the stability of the core logic with these new changes. The room went silent. Bryce held his breath. Trevor was staring at his shoes. The core logic, I began, my voice clear and steady, is extremely stable. It's a robust, low-latency engine designed for long-term viability. Bryce exhaled. He thought I was playing along. However, I continued. The current implementation running on the servers, the one with the security bypass, is a deviation from the certified architecture. Deviation? Sterling raised an eyebrow. Yes, it's a fork, an unauthorized fork. Bryce interrupted loudly. It's an update, an internal update. Naomi is just protective of her legacy code. Sterling ignored him. He was looking at me. When you say unauthorized, Miss Adler, do you mean unauthorized by the frantic nature of the market, or unauthorized by protocol? I mean unauthorized by the owner of the code, I said. The air left the room. The owner? Sterling asked slowly. Arcturus Capital owns the code. I didn't say anything, I just looked at Bryce. Bryce? Sterling asked. Of course we own it. Bryce shouted, standing up. She's a disgruntled employee. She's trying to sabotage the deal. I'm not disgruntled, I said. I'm contractual. Mark, the compliance officer, was sitting in the corner taking minutes. He stopped typing. He slowly reached into his bag and pulled out his laptop. He opened it. Mark, Bryce snapped, put that away. Actually, Mark said, his voice shaking but audible. I think you should see this. Mark slid his laptop toward Sterling. On the screen was the scanned copy of Appendix D, highlighted in yellow. Sterling put on a pair of reading glasses. He read the clause. He read it again. He looked at the date on the document, and he looked at the date on the security logs Mark had helpfully pulled up in the next tab. Oct 14th, Sterling read, Security Protocol 4 bypassed. User Trevor, he looked up at Bryce. The look wasn't angry, it was disappointed, which is worse in business. Bryce, did you alter the fundamental security protocols without Miss Adler's consent? It's just legal gobbledygook. Bryce yelled, it doesn't mean anything. We paid her salary, we own the work. That's not what this says, Sterling said, tapping the screen. This says that as of October 14th, the IP reverted to the author, which means, he turned to me, Miss Adler. Do you currently hold the rights to the engine we are proposing to invest in? I do, I said. And do you have a licensing agreement with Arcturus Capital? I do not. Sterling closed the leather folder. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Well, Sterling said, that complicates the valuation. Bryce looked like he was going to stroke out. His face was a map of panic. You can't listen to her. She's bluffing. The code is on our servers. Is it? I asked. I reached into my pocket. I placed the USB drive on the polished mahogany table. It made a small, distinct clack sound. The code on your servers, I said to Bryce, is the corrupted version. The one Trevor broke. The one that is currently running without safety rails. It works for now, sure. But it's leaking data, and it's legally compromised. I pointed to the USB drive. This drive contains the last valid, secure, and legally pristine version of the Arcturus engine. The version that generated the 18% returns you pitched to Vantage. And per my contract, this code, the source logic, belongs to me. The room was frozen. It was a tableau of corporate horror. Sterling looked at the USB drive, then at Bryce. Is she telling the truth, Bryce? Does she have the source? It doesn't matter. Bryce screamed. He was losing it. The veneer of the cool hedge fund manager had cracked, revealing the spoiled child underneath. She stole it. That's theft. It's her possession, I said coolly. I left the corrupted version for you. You can keep Trevor's code. Good luck with the SEC audit when they ask why you removed the compliance filters. Sterling stood up. His two associates stood up with him. They moved in perfect unison, like a singular entity of rejection. Bryce, Sterling said, we can't proceed with this. The IP ownership is in dispute, the security architecture is compromised, and frankly, your risk management appears to be non-existent. Wait, Bryce scrambled around the table. We can fix it, we can. We can sue her, we can get an injunction. I'm not investing $300 million into a lawsuit, Sterling said. I came to buy a Ferrari. You're trying to sell me a stolen car with cut brakes. Sterling turned to me. He nodded, a small mark of respect. Miss Adler, if you ever decide to license your technology to a firm that reads its contracts, give me a call. I will, I said. Sterling and his team walked out. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a submarine. Bryce stood facing the door, his back to me. His shoulders were heaving. Trevor was slumped in his chair, looking like he wished he could dissolve into the upholstery. Peters, the general counsel, was massaging his temples, realizing his career at this firm was effectively over. Then Bryce turned around. His face was twisted into a rictus of pure impotent rage. You, he whispered, you bitch. I'm a professional, Bryce, I said, standing up. There's a difference. I'll destroy you, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. I'll bury you in legal fees. You'll never work on the street again. No, you won't, Peters said from the side of the table. Bryce whipped his head around. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of the law, Peters said wearily. She has us, Bryce, dead to rights. Appendix D is clear. If we sue, we lose. And in discovery, all the logs of Trevor bypassing the security will become public record. The SEC will shut us down. The investors will flee. It's over. Bryce looked at Peters, then at Trevor, then at me. The reality was crashing down on him. Money was gone. The reputation was gone. The toy he had tried to break was gone. He looked at the USB drive on the table. He lunged for it. I didn't flinch. I let him grab it. He held it up like a trophy. I have it. I have the code. That's encrypted, I said. AES 256. Without the key phrase, it's just a piece of metal, and you can't brute force it. I wrote the encryption. He stared at the drive. He looked like he wanted to crush it. He knew it was the only leverage he had left, and he couldn't even use it. What do you want? He choked out. Just tell me what you want. I picked up my purse. I looked around the boardroom one last time. I want you to admit it, I said. Admit what? Bryce rasped. Admit that you didn't know what you were doing. Admit that you tried to break something you didn't understand because your ego couldn't handle that you didn't build it. Bryce stared at me. His face was purple. The veins in his neck were bulging. For a second, I thought he might actually attack me. But Bryce was a coward. Cowards don't throw punches, they throw tantrums. I own you, he screamed. The sound echoed off the glass walls. I own you and your algorithms. I am Arcturus. It was the scream of a king who had just realized his throne was made of cardboard. I stood there, smoothing my jacket, watching him unravel. It was pathetic. It was glorious. You don't own me, Bryce, I said softly. And as of yesterday, you don't even own the algorithms. You own a shell company with a high burn rate and a compromised server. I walked over to the table and held out my hand. The drive, please. He clutched it tight. No, okay, I shrugged. Keep it, it's useless. I have the backup, and I have the key, and I have the contract. I turned to the general counsel. Peters, have your office contact my lawyer. We can discuss a transition plan. I'm willing to license the engine back to Arcturus, but the rates have gone up significantly, and it comes with a condition. What condition? Peters asked, looking like he just wanted to go home and drink scotch. Bryce steps down as CEO, and Trevor is terminated immediately. For cause, you can't do that. Bryce yelled. I'm the IP holder, I said. I can dictate the terms of the license. If you want the engine that makes the money, you play by my rules. If not, well, I hear Vantage Partners is looking for a new tech partner. I have Sterling's card. I walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look back. I heard Bryce screaming something about loyalty and betrayal, but it sounded distant, like a dog barking 3 streets over. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out into the sunshine. It was a crisp fall day in Chicago. The air smelled like exhaust and potential. I checked my phone. A text from Mark. He's crying. Literally crying. Peters is drafting the termination letter for Trevor. Can I use you as a reference? I typed back, absolutely, call me tomorrow. I didn't destroy Arcturus. I saved the part that mattered, the code, and let the rot cut itself out. In the end, they accepted the deal. Bryce was moved to a non-executive chairman role, basically paid to stay away. Trevor was fired. I consulted for the firm at a rate of $800 an hour to fix the mess they made, but I never gave them the source code back. We signed a licensing agreement. I own the engine, they just rent the horsepower. I walked to the nearest bar, ordered a double bourbon, and sat by the window. I watched the people rushing by, chasing money, chasing status. I took a sip of the drink. It burned, hot and clean. They tried to rewrite the rules. They forgot that I wrote the game. So, that's how I dismantled a hedge fund with a contract clause and a USB drive. If you learned something about reading the fine print, or just enjoyed watching a rich kid hit a wall at 100 mph, drop a comment. I'll be here, sipping my bourbon, writing code that belongs to me. Real power doesn't announce itself, it simply asserts. Naomi quietly placed that USB key, letting her meticulous contract speak for itself. True authority comes from earned expertise, not just a title. Always know your worth. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story. The coffee in the break room on the 14th floor always tasted like burnt copper and ambition, a fitting flavor for a defense contracting firm in DC that prided itself on synergy while casually managing data streams that could topple unstable regimes. I stood by the window, watching the morning traffic choke the arteries of the capital, my reflection ghosting against the glass. To the casual observer, to the HR department, and certainly to my new boss, I was Alina Rudenko, a 42-year-old compliance risk officer with a penchant for gray cardigans, silence, and tedious spreadsheet audits. I was the woman you forgot the moment you left the elevator. I was the office furniture of the cybersecurity division. That was the point. You don't hide a needle in a haystack, you hide it in a pile of other needles. I took a sip of the terrible coffee and checked my watch. 0800 a.m. In precisely 3 minutes, morning briefing would start. By the way, if you're reading this and enjoy stories about corporate idiots accidentally triggering international incidents, go ahead and hit subscribe and give this a like. It keeps the team motivated to share more nightmare fuel. Anyway, back to the impending disaster. The briefing was standard procedure, but the atmosphere had shifted in the last week. The air in the office felt thinner, sharper. That's because of Chase. Chase. Even saying his name in my head made my molars grind. He was our new director of operations, a 30-something external hire from Silicon Valley who wore sneakers with suits and used words like disrupt and paradigm shift as if they were punctuation. He didn't understand that in our line of work, handling back-end data for federal intelligence agencies, disruption usually meant people died. He looked at me and saw a relic, a barrier. A middle-aged woman who slowed down his agile workflow with pesky things like federal security protocols and need-to-know compartmentation. I walked into the conference room. It was one of those glass-walled fishbowls designed to make everyone feel exposed. Chase was already there, leaning back in the leather chair at the head of the table, spinning a pen. He had that gleam in his eye, look of a man who has never been told no and certainly never had to clean up the mess when a yes went wrong. Alina, he said, not looking up from his tablet. Glad you could join us. I was just telling the team about the new vision for Q3. Good morning, Chase, I said, my voice level, devoid of inflection. I took my usual seat in the corner, away from the main cluster of eager junior analysts who were practically vibrating with the desire to impress him. You need to trim the fat, Chase announced, finally looking up. His gaze swept the room, landing on me for a fraction of a second too long. Old processes, legacy systems. The client, the agency, wants speed. They want real-time analytics. We're bottlenecking their data with all these compliance checks. My stomach tightened. The compliance checks are mandated by the mesmerizingly boring but legally binding contract we signed with the Department of Defense, I said softly. Latency is a feature, not a bug. It allows for encryption scrubbing. Chase waved a hand dismissively. That's the old way of thinking, that's fear talking. We're going to streamline. I'm authorizing a bypass on the secondary firewall for the outbound logs. We go live with the new protocol on Friday. The room went quiet. The junior analysts looked at each other. They knew enough to know that was risky, but they were too young to know why. You can't do that, I said. I didn't raise my voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The secondary firewall isn't just for data integrity. It's a masking agent for source protection. And I'm the director of operations, Chase snapped, his veneer of cool guy boss cracking instantly. And I'm telling you, Alina, that you're too focused on the can'ts and not enough on the hows. If you can't get on board with the new direction, maybe you're not a cultural fit for where this firm is going. There it was, the threat. I didn't respond. I simply nodded, opened my laptop, and pretended to take notes. But my mind was racing. Chase wasn't just incompetent, he was a wrecking ball. He didn't know that the data he wanted to streamline included the encrypted comms of a specific asset deep inside the Russian Ministry of Defense. An asset I had been handling for 11 years. An asset known only as tungsten. My laptop gave a soft, almost imperceptible ping. It wasn't an email notification. It was a custom alert from a background daemon I had running on a partitioned drive, a drive Chase's IT team didn't know existed. I glanced at the screen. A single word flashed in the lower right corner, disguised as a system update notification. Tungsten. My heart stopped. That wasn't a scheduled contact. Tungsten only reached out unscheduled if the walls were closing in. If he was in danger. Chase was still talking. Something about vertical integration and trimming dead weight, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I stared at that notification. If Tungsten was active, I needed to be at a secure terminal immediately. I needed to authenticate the packet and route the extraction protocols. But I was stuck in a glass box with a man who thought cybersecurity was an obstacle course for his ego. Elena, Chase's voice cut through the noise. Are we boring you? I looked up. No, Chase, I'm just processing the implications. Good, he smirked, because the train is leaving the station. You're either on it or you're on the tracks. He had no idea. He thought he was threatening my job. He didn't realize he was threatening the life of the only man in Moscow who could tell us if nuclear warheads were being moved to the border. I closed my laptop. I understand the directive, I lied. I'll start reviewing the firewall protocols. That's the spirit, Chase said, clapping his hands together. See, even the old guard can learn new tricks. I walked out of that meeting with a calm, steady gait, but inside I was screaming. The game had changed. Chase wasn't just an annoyance anymore. He was a liability. And in my world, liabilities got liquidated. But first, I had to see what Tungsten had sent. And I had to do it without the disruptor-in-chief looking over my shoulder. The reorganization memo hit the company inbox at 2:00 p.m., and it was worse than I had anticipated. It wasn't just a restructuring of teams, it was a demolition of the compartmentalization protocols that kept our operation legal and safe. Chase called it Project Glass House. He wanted total transparency between the civilian data analysts and the government liaison officers. In layman's terms, he wanted the people who fixed the printers to have the same clearance visuals as the people routing NSA packets. I sat in my office, a small, windowless cube that I had specifically requested because it was harder to bug, and read the document 3 times. My hands weren't shaking, but I could feel a cold sweat prickling at the base of my spine. Merging these clearances was a federal crime. It was also a death sentence for any cover operative whose identity was masked in the logs. I checked the secure channel again. The tungsten alert from the morning had been a handshake, a prepare for transmission signal, but the transmission hadn't come. The digital dead drop was empty. That meant one of 2 things. Either tungsten had been interrupted, or he was on the run. I needed to stall Chase. I needed 24 hours to secure the line and get a clean extraction order from Langley. If Chase collapsed the firewalls on Friday, Tungsten's unique digital fingerprint, which we masked as corrupted data packets, would be visible to anyone running a basic diagnostic, including the Russian cyber warfare units monitoring our outbound traffic. I walked to Chase's office. His door was open, aggressively open, symbolizing his open door policy that was actually a trap for anyone stupid enough to walk in and disagree with him. He was standing at a whiteboard, drawing circles and arrows that meant absolutely nothing. Chase, I said, stepping into the doorway. We need to talk about Project Glass House. He turned, marker in hand, beaming. Elena, incredible, right? I'm flattening the hierarchy. No more secrets. We're going to be one big, efficient organism. Chase. We can't merge the clearance levels, I said, keeping my voice low. It violates Title 50 of the U.S. Code. It violates our contract with the client. And frankly, it's dangerous. He sighed, capping the marker with an exaggerated click. There you go again. Dangerous. Violates code. Elena, I spoke to legal. They said as long as we have internal NDAs, we're covered. You're clinging to red tape like it's a life raft. Legal reviews contracts, not operational security, I countered. There are active partitions in our system that protect external equities. If you drop the firewalls, those equities are exposed. He walked over to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. Let me be clear, he said, his voice dropping to a patronizing whisper. I was brought here to fix this company, to modernize it. You represent the stagnation I was hired to eliminate. I don't care about your external equities. I care about throughput. I care about the board meeting next week where I get to show them that I increased efficiency by 40%. Efficiency at the cost of security is negligence, I said. I shouldn't have said it. I knew the moment the words left my mouth that I had crossed a line with him. But the silence from Tungsten was screaming in my ears. Chase's face hardened. The smile vanished. Negligence? You're calling me negligent. I'm advising you of the risk, I corrected. If you proceed, I will have to log a formal dissent in the compliance record. He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Log whatever you want, Alina, but know this, I'm restructuring the personnel chart too, and I'm looking for team players, not roadblocks. I left his office, my blood running cold. He wasn't going to listen. He was going to burn the house down to prove he could fix the heating. Back at my desk, I initiated a protocol I hadn't touched in 5 years. I opened a terminal window and typed in a command line that looked like a standard disk defragmentation request. In reality, it was a heartbeat ping to Tungsten's last known location. Nothing. The cursor blinked. Come on, I thought. Give me something. Then a response. Not a location, but a code. Solstice. My breath hitched. Solstice meant the asset was burned. It meant his cover was blown. He was in immediate danger of capture or execution. He needed immediate extraction. I reached for the secure phone to call the station chief at Langley. I needed to declare an emergency. Alina, I jumped. Chase was standing in the doorway of my office. He had two people with him, the head of HR, a woman named Linda who looked like she was constantly smelling something unpleasant, and a security guard. Put the phone down, Chase said. Wasn't smiling anymore. I'm in the middle of a diagnostic, I said, my hand hovering over the receiver. It's critical, it's over, Chase said. Linda stepped forward, clutching a folder to her chest. Alina, effective immediately, your employment is terminated for cause. Specifically, insubordination and refusal to adhere to new operational directives. I stared at them. They were firing me. In the middle of an active exfiltration crisis. You can't do this right now. I said, my voice steady but urgent. Chase, listen to me. There's a situation unfolding that you do not understand. If you cut my access now, people will die. Chase rolled his eyes. Always the drama. People will die. It's a server farm, Alina, not a battlefield. Hand over your badge and your laptop. I looked at the phone. I looked at the terminal where the word Solstice was fading from the screen. If I fought them, security would drag me out. It would cause a scene, and I would lose any chance of helping Tungsten from the outside. I had to play the long game. I had to let them win the battle so I could win the war. Okay, I said. I stood up slowly. You want the badge? You can have it. I reached for my lanyard. But as I did, my other hand brushed the enter key on my keyboard one last time. It wasn't to save a file. It was to execute a script I had written years ago. A dead man's switch. If my credentials were revoked without a specific suppression code, the system would silently tag every single action Chase took from this moment forward and mirror it to a secure cloud server accessible only by the CIA. Here, I said, handing the badge to Linda. And the laptop, Chase demanded. I closed the lid. It's encrypted. You won't be able to access it. IT will wipe it, Chase sneered. Get your personal effects. You have 5 minutes. There is a specific kind of silence that accompanies a walk of shame in a corporate office. As Linda and the security guard escorted me back to my desk to collect my personal items, the entire floor seemed to hold its breath. Heads bowed, eyes averted. The junior analysts, the ones who had laughed at Chase's jokes, suddenly found their screens incredibly fascinating. They were terrified. If the compliance officer, the fixture who had been there for a decade, be walked out like a criminal, no one was safe. I didn't look at them. I focused on the task. I picked up a framed photo of a dog I didn't own. Standard tradecraft makes you look human without revealing personal leverage, a stress ball, and my favorite mug. I left the plants. They were fake anyway, much like Chase's leadership skills. Make sure she doesn't take any flash drives, Chase barked from the hallway. He was enjoying this. He was preening. He was the alpha wolf culling the weak. I have nothing but personal effects, I said to the guard, opening my purse to show him. He looked embarrassed. He knew me. We had chatted about his kids' soccer games for years. Sorry, Miss Rudenko, he muttered. Just doing the job. I know, Mike, it's okay. As I walked to the elevators, I felt the severance of the digital tether. My phone, which had been synced to the company's secure server, buzzed once and then went dark as the MDM, mobile device management, profile was remotely wiped. I was now blind. I couldn't see the logs. I couldn't see the firewall status. I couldn't see Tungsten, but Chase had made a critical error. He assumed that revoking my clearance stopped the machinery I had built. It didn't. It just removed the brakes. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the sight of Chase standing with his arms crossed. Victor's smirk plastered on his face. As the car descended, I closed my eyes and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. The mask slipped for just a second. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Tungsten was out there in the cold, and his handler had just been blinded. I walked out of the lobby and into the humid DC afternoon. The sun was blinding. It felt surreal to be standing on the sidewalk at 2:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. I walked 2 blocks north, away from the building, to a nondescript sedan parked in a garage that cost more per hour than most people made in a day. I got in, locked the doors, and reached under the passenger seat. I pulled out a burner phone, a heavy encrypted satellite device that looked like a relic from 2005. I powered it on. It took 30 seconds to acquire a signal. Those 30 seconds felt like a lifetime. I dialed a number that didn't exist in any phone book. Status. Male voice answered. No greeting. This is Handler 7 Alpha, I said. My cover is blown. I've been terminated from the front company. Credentials revoked. There was a pause, and the asset signaled Solstice at 1400 hours. I was unable to initiate extraction before loss of access. Damn it, the voice hissed. It was the deputy station chief. How compromised is the company architecture? The new director, Chase, is lowering the firewalls on Friday. He's merging the clearance levels. If Tungsten tries to route through the server after that, his traffic will be visible to anyone looking, and the Russians are definitely looking. We can't raid the company without cause, the chief said. It would alert the Kremlin that the company is a CIA front. We need a trigger. You'll have it, I said, watching the entrance of my old office building through the windshield. I left a logic bomb in the exit protocol. When Chase runs his optimization script on Friday, it's going to flag every irregular packet as a security breach and auto-report it to the DoD. It will look like a massive data leak caused by incompetence. That's risky, Alina. It's necessary, I said. Chase is going to hang himself. I just provided the rope, but we need to get tungsten out now. I need you to activate the secondary relay. We can't do that without the encryption keys you held at the firm. I know, I said. That's why I need you to pick me up. I didn't write the keys down, I memorized them. Stay put. Asset recovery team is inbound. Ida 10 minutes. I hung up and leaned back in the seat. I watched the building. Chase was probably up there right now, giving a speech about the new era. He had no idea that by firing me, he had just engaged the gears of a machine that would grind him into dust. They took the bait, I whispered to the empty car. But as I watched, I saw a notification pop up on the burner phone. It was a forwarded packet from the passive listening post I had set up on the company's guest Wi-Fi months ago. Subject, priority / tungsten / location ping. It was a geolocation tag. Moscow, but not the ministry. It was a transit hub. He was moving, and he was terrified. Thursday passed in a blur of manic energy inside the company. According to the intercepted chatter I was monitoring from my temporary base of operations, a sterile hotel room in Arlington with blackout curtains, Chase was on a victory lap. He had ordered pizza for the entire floor. He was walking around high-fiving the developers. He had scheduled the firewall migration for Friday morning, calling it Liberation Day. I sat in the dark, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my face. The satellite uplink was stable. I had recreated a mirror of the network traffic using the backdoor I'd mentioned to the chief. It wasn't full access. I couldn't stop Chase, but I could see what he was doing. At 10 o'clock a.m., a junior sysadmin named Kevin, a good kid, smart but timid, flagged an anomaly. I saw the ticket appear in the queue. Ticket hash 9942, irregular encrypted traffic on port 8080. Originates from legacy sector. Recommendation, delay migration until source is identified. Port 8080 was the channel Tungsten used. It was the lifeline. Kevin had spotted the heartbeat. I watched the ticket status. 10 minutes later it was updated. Status, closed, resolved by Chase admin. Notes, ignore legacy noise. Proceed with migration. Stop looking for ghosts, Kevin. My fist clenched around the coffee mug until my knuckles turned white. Chase wasn't just ignoring the warning signs. He was actively suppressing them to preserve his timeline. He was choosing his ego over national security. I switched screens to the map of Moscow. The geolocation tag for tungsten hadn't moved in 4 hours. That was bad. An asset on the run keeps moving. Static means captured or dead or pinned down. Come on, I whispered. Move. The phone rang. It was the chief, Alina. We have visual confirmation of activity near the asset's last ping. FSB vans, heavy presence. My stomach dropped. Did they find him? Unclear. But we're picking up chatter on the Russian military bands. They know there's a leak. They're closing the net. They're looking for the digital footprint. And tomorrow morning, Chase is going to light up that footprint like a flare, I said. Can you stop it remotely? No. He physically pulled the server blades for the secondary firewall. He's bypassing the software controls. It's a hardware bridge now. Unless I walk in there and cut the cable with bolt cutters, the data merges at 0900 tomorrow. We can't get a team in there that fast without causing a diplomatic incident, the chief said. If we raid a US company, we admit we were using it for espionage. The Russians will use that to justify executing the asset publicly. So we have to let Chase do it. I realized, the horror settling in. We have to let him expose the asset to prove the incompetence. No, the chief said. We need a diversion. We need the system to crash before the merge completes. I looked at the code scrolling on my third monitor. The dead man's switch I had mentioned earlier. It was designed to log errors, but with a few tweaks, it could be weaponized. I can overload the logic bomb, I said. Turn it into a denial of service attack from the inside. It will brick the servers. We'll destroy the company's credibility, cost them millions, and probably get Chase arrested for negligence. Do it, the chief said. Burn the company. Save the asset. I need to get close, I said. My remote access is read only. I need to be within Wi-Fi range of the building to inject the command. You're compromised, Alina. If they see you, they won't see me, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. I'm just the woman they fired. I'm nobody. I drove back to the city as the sun went down. The building, a tower of glass and steel, loomed against the twilight sky. It looked peaceful, corporate, safe. Inside, Chase was probably drafting his press release about the successful restructuring. I parked in the underground garage, 3 spots away from the elevator bank. I pulled out a high-gain antenna and connected it to my laptop. I scanned the networks. There it was, guest Wi-Fi, weak but usable. I started typing. The code was complex, a cascade of commands that would flood the internal routers with contradictory instructions the moment the migration started. It wouldn't stop the merge, but it would freeze the data flow long enough for the asset to go dark. As I worked, I saw a movement in the rearview mirror, a security patrol car. I lowered the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The car cruised past, the guard sweeping a flashlight over the rows of parked vehicles. The beam washed over my windshield, blinding me for a second. He didn't stop. I let out a breath and hit enter. Command queued, execute at 090000. I was setting the timer on a bomb, and I was sitting right on top of it. Friday morning, 08:59 a.m. I wasn't in the building, but I could imagine the scene perfectly. Chase would be standing at the front of the operations floor, probably holding a coffee cup with a smug slogan like "Fueling the Hustle." The junior analysts would be at their stations, fingers hovering over keyboards, waiting for the go command. The big screens on the wall would be displaying the network topology, currently green, waiting to turn the new shade of optimized blue that Chase was so fond of. I was sitting in a diner across the street, nursing a tea I hadn't touched. My laptop was open, connected to the passive sniffer. 0900 a.m. Process initiated. The data stream on my screen spiked. Chase had flipped the switch. The firewalls dropped. The disparate databases, civilian HR records, payroll, and the highly classified intelligence routing logs began to merge into one data lake. For 3 seconds it worked. Then the logic bomb detonated. On my screen, the traffic graph didn't just spike, it flatlined. Code I had injected flooded the routers with billions of requests per second, specifically targeting the handshake protocols between the merged databases. Inside the building, the effect would be immediate. Screens freezing, alarms blaring, the server room fans spinning up to maximum RPM, sounding like jet engines trying to take off. I watched the guest Wi-Fi signal flicker and die. The entire building's external comms went down, but I wasn't celebrating, because in those 3 seconds before the crash, a single packet had escaped. A packet tagged with the digital signature of Tungsten. I checked the burner phone. A message from the chief, leak detected. Russian signals intelligence just spiked. They saw IT, damn it, I cursed, slamming the laptop shut. Chase had been too fast, or my code had been a millisecond too slow. The optimizing script had pushed the queue out before the crash took hold. Tungsten's location and encryption key had been broadcast in the clear for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I threw cash on the table and ran out of the diner. The phone buzzed again, asset going dark. Emergency Protocol Zulu. Protocol Zulu meant every man for himself. The CIA was cutting the line. They were disavowing the operation to protect the agency. Tungsten was on his own. I sat in my car, staring at the building. People were starting to gather in the lobby, visible through the glass, confusion, panic. Then the emails started hitting the public servers, which were on a backup loop. My personal phone, which I had reactivated, lit up with notifications from former colleagues who still had my number. Text from Sarah accounting. OMG Alina, everything is down. Chase is screaming at it. Smoke in the server room. Text from Kevin, sysadmin. Did you do this? The logs? They're garbage, but I saw something before it crashed. Do D headers? Alina, what were we actually working on? Kevin was smart. He was putting it together. And if he was putting it together, Chase would be looking for a scapegoat within the hour. I needed to disappear, but I couldn't. I had to wait for the cleanup crew. At 10:30 a.m., the first real consequence arrived. Not the police, not the FBI, legal. The company's general counsel, a terrifying woman named Miss Vane, arrived in a town car. She stormed into the building. Half an hour later, 3 contracts with NATO-linked vendors were abruptly paused. The automated systems at the Pentagon had detected the breach and automatically severed ties with the firm. Chase's efficiency had just cost the company its primary revenue stream in 90 minutes. But inside the bubble of his ego, he still didn't get it. I checked the intercepted internal comms, which were now leaking like a sieve due to the crash. Chase to CEO, minor glitch in the migration. Legacy hardware issue, fixing it now. Rudenko left us a mess. He was blaming me. Perfect. I dialed the chief. The breach is confirmed. Chase is trying to cover it up. He's blaming the crash on my previous mismanagement. Let him, the chief said. His voice was ice cold. The asset has been moved. We think we got him to a safe house, but it's close, too close. The Russians are tearing Moscow apart. And the company, we're done with them. The station chief is landing in DC in 2 hours. We're taking over. Am I clear? I asked. Not yet, the chief said. You're the handler. You need to testify. You need to walk back into that building and point the finger. Walk back in? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. They'll arrest me for trespassing. No, they won't, the chief said, because you're going to walk in with us. Monday morning, 6:03 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting the executive parking garage in deep, bruised purples and grays. The air smelled of ozone and wet concrete. 2 black SUVs rolled into the garage, moving with the heavy, predatory grace of sharks entering a reef. They didn't stop at the security booth. The barrier arm lifted automatically, overridden by a remote signal. I sat in the back of the second SUV. Next to me was the deputy station chief, a man named Miller who looked like a geography teacher but had killed men with his bare hands in 3 different decades. Ready? Miller asked. I've been ready since Thursday, I said, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. I wasn't wearing my cardigan today. I was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. I wasn't the compliance officer anymore. I was the asset handler. The vehicles stopped in the reserved spots marked CEO and Director of Ops. We got out. 4 other agents, plainclothes but clearly armed, flanked us. We walked to the elevator. Miller swiped a card that definitely wasn't issued by HR. The lights on the panel turned green. We rode up to the 40th floor in silence. When the doors opened, the reception area was empty except for the night guard, who looked up, saw the badges hanging from the agents' necks, and wisely decided to look back down at his phone. We walked straight to the main conference room. The CEO, nervous man named Sterling who usually let his directors run wild, was already there. Chase was there too, looking disheveled. He clearly hadn't slept. He was pacing, yelling into a phone. "I don't care what the logs say, it's a sabotage. That woman planted a virus," Chase shouted. He spun around as the doors opened. He froze. He saw me. Then he saw Miller. Then he saw the agents blocking the door. "Who are?" Chase started, lowering the phone. "Can't just barge in here. This is a secure facility." "It was a secure facility," Miller said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He walked to the head of the table and threw a thick file down on the mahogany surface. The sound was like a gunshot. "Now it's a crime scene." "Who are you?" Sterling, the CEO, asked, standing up. He was shaking. "Central Intelligence Agency," Miller said, "and you just burned our most valuable asset in the Eastern Hemisphere." Chase laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "CIA? You're joking. This is a data management firm. We do payroll for the duty." "That's the cover," I said, stepping forward. Chase looked at me, his eyes widening. I fired you. Security?" "Sit down, Chase," Miller barked. It wasn't a request. It was a command that compelled obedience on a genetic level. Chase sat. "Alina Rudenko is a GS-15 intelligence liaison," Miller continued. "She was placed here to manage a specific, compartmentalized stream of data. A stream you, Mr. Chase, decided to democratize last Friday." I was optimizing," Chase stammered. "The efficiency metrics?" "Your optimization broadcast the location of a deep cover operative to the Russian FSB," Miller interrupted. "At 090003 on Friday, your merge server packet sent a clear text header with his coordinates. At 11 o'clock, his apartment was raided. He is currently missing." The color drained from Chase's face. He looked from Miller to me. "But she didn't tell me, she just talked about compliance." "I told you it was dangerous," I said, my voice cold. "I told you it violated Title 50. I told you people would die. You told me I was dead weight. We need access to everything," Miller said to the CEO. "Every server, every hard drive, every email, and specifically, audit logs of Mr. Chase's administrative overrides." "Of course," Sterling whispered. "Whatever you need." "And Chase?" Miller looked at the director of ops, who was now sweating profusely. "You're not going anywhere. Federal agents are outside your home right now executing a search warrant." "Search warrant?" Chase squeaked. "For what?" "Espionage Act violations, gross negligence, mishandling of classified information." Miller leaned in close. "You wanted to be a disruptor, Chase. Congratulations, you just disrupted the national security of the United States." Chase slumped in his chair, defeated. He looked at me pleadingly. "Alina, tell them. It was just a reorg." I looked at him. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger. Just the cold calculation of the job. "It wasn't a reorg, Chase," I said. "It was a suicide." The next 3 days were a masterclass in forensic destruction. The company didn't just stop working, it was dissected. The CIA technical team, led by experts who made Chase's rockstar developers look like toddlers with crayons, ripped the servers apart. I sat in a temporary office on the 40th floor, Chase's old office, ironically, guiding them through the architecture. Here, I pointed to a string of code on the projected screen. This is where he bypassed the encryption handshake. He manually disabled the SSL verification to speed up the packet transfer. Lead tech shook his head. "He disabled SSL on a top-secret relay? Is he insane? He's efficient," I said dryly. Down the hall in the conference room, Chase was undergoing a debriefing that was rapidly turning into an interrogation. He was trying to spin it. I could hear him through the thin walls sometimes, his voice rising in desperate pitches. "She was erratic," Chase yelled at one point. "She refused to communicate. She sabotaged the code." But the logs didn't lie. That afternoon, Miller walked in with a printed report. "He's trying to pin the crash on your logic bomb," he said. "Claims you maliciously attacked the company infrastructure." "I did," I said, "to stop the leak." "We know that, and the logs prove it," Miller said. "The timestamps are clear. Your denial of service attack hit after his migration script executed the bypass. If you hadn't crashed the system, the leak would have continued for hours instead of seconds. You didn't cause the breach. Lena, you cauterized the wound." "Does the Senate know that?" I asked. "You're about to tell them," Miller said. "The Select Committee on Intelligence is convening a closed session tomorrow. They want to hear from the handler." The hearing was held in a SIF-sensitive compartmented information facility, deep in the bowels of the Capitol building. No phones, no windows, just heavy wood tables and senators who looked very tired and very angry. I sat alone at the witness table. Behind me, CEO Sterling and Chase sat with their expensive lawyers. Chase looked like a ghost. He had lost 10 pounds in 3 days. Senator Vance, the chair, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Rudenko, You served as the liaison for 11 years? Yes, Senator. And in that time, did you ever have a security breach? Never, sir, until Mr. Chase arrived. Correct. Chase's lawyer stood up. Objection. My client was acting within his authority as Director of Operations to modernize. Sit down, Senator Vance snapped. This isn't a courtroom, counselor. It's an inquiry into how we lost eyes on the Kremlin. He turned back to me. Miss Rudenko, in your professional opinion, was this avoidable? I turned in my chair to look directly at Chase. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on his cuff. It wasn't just avoidable, Senator, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. It was predicted. I warned him verbally. I warned him in writing. I warned him via the protocols. He chose to view security as an obstacle to his personal ambition. He didn't just break the rules. He broke the shield. Chase flinched. The forensic IT report confirms your statement, Vance said, flipping a page. Chase ordered the physical removal of the firewall blades. That requires intent. He called it trimming the fat, I added. Vance took off his glasses. Well, it seems he trimmed the wrong thing. Hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, Chase's career wasn't just over, it was incinerated. The lawyers were already distancing themselves. Sterling, the CEO, looked like he was mentally calculating his golden parachute, which Miller had assured me was being frozen by the Treasury. As we walked out, Chase tried to approach me. Alina, he rasped. I didn't know, you have to believe me. I didn't know it was real spies. I stopped. I looked at him one last time. That's the problem, Chase, I said. You thought the world was just data. You forgot there are people attached to it. I walked away. But the victory felt hollow, because we still hadn't heard from Tungsten. 2 days later, Chase was formally placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of the FBI investigation. The pending part was a formality. He was done. His security clearance, what little he had, was permanently revoked. He would never work in defense, tech, or likely even a bank again. He was radioactive. The company was in shambles. The stock had plummeted 40% after the data breach news leaked. The press didn't know it was CIA data, just that it was a massive failure. Layoffs were starting. The synergy Chase had promised had resulted in total collapse. I was back in my apartment. I wasn't working. I was technically still fired, pending reinstatement. I spent my days drinking tea and staring at the secure phone Miller had left me. Silence is the loudest sound in the world when you're waiting for a ghost to call. Miller had told me the extraction team in Moscow had found the safe house empty. Signs of a struggle? Maybe, or maybe just a hurried exit, they didn't know. Tungsten was in the wind. If he was dead, it was on my conscience. I should have stopped Chase sooner. I should have physically pulled the fire alarm. I should have done something. A knock on my door. I froze. I checked the peephole. It was a courier, not a tactical team. A regular FedEx guy. I opened the door. Delivery for Alina Rudenko. I signed for it. It was a small padded envelope. No return address. I took it to the kitchen and scanned it with a handheld detector. No electronics. No explosives. I opened it. Inside was a cheap plastic flash drive and a postcard. The postcard was a tourist image of a beach in Thailand. Generic, you could buy it at any airport. I turned it over. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, Cyrillic script, translation, I am safe. Thank you for the loud noise. They were looking at the fire and I left through the back door. I dropped the postcard and grabbed the table to steady myself. Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked my eyes, the crash, my logic bomb, the massive data spike. It hadn't just exposed the leak. It had created a chaotic diversion. Russian cyber defense teams had been so focused on the massive attack coming from the American server, my denial of service flood, that they had momentarily taken their eyes off the physical surveillance net. I hadn't just cauterized the wound. I had set off a smoke bomb, and in that smoke, Tungsten had slipped away. I plugged the flash drive into my isolated laptop. It contained a single text file, a list of coordinates, a retrieval site in Helsinki. He was out. It was across the border. I laughed. It started as a chuckle and turned into a full-body release of tension. I sat on my kitchen floor, holding the postcard of the Thai beach, laughing until my sides ached. Chase's incompetence had endangered him, but my sabotage had saved him. The phone rang. It was Miller. We just got a ping from the Helsinki station, Miller said. He walked in 10 minutes ago. He's asking for Handler 7 Alpha. He's safe, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He is, Miller said, and he brought the data. The archive Chase tried to delete. Tungsten had a backup on him. We didn't lose anything, except a mid-sized consulting firm. A fair trade, I said. Get dressed, Alina, Miller said. The director wants to see you. The meeting with the director was brief. There were no medals. We don't get medals for fixing messes, only for preventing them, but there was an offer. We're dissolving the contract with the firm. The director said, obviously. We're moving the data handling in-house. We want you to run the division. I'm not a manager, I said. I'm a handler. You're both, he said. You navigated a hostile corporate takeover, neutralized a compromised executive, and orchestrated a blind extraction of a Tier 1 asset using nothing but a laptop and a logic bomb. You're exactly what we need. I took the job. 1 week later, I went back to the building one last time to clear out my office, for real this time. The atmosphere was funeral. The synergy posters were being taken down. The open plan office was quiet, but it was the quiet of defeat, not focus. I saw Kevin, the young sysadmin. He was packing a box. Alina, he asked, looking up, I heard rumors that you're with the government? You shouldn't listen to rumors, Kevin, I said gently, but you're good at what you do. Check your LinkedIn tomorrow. I might know some people looking for a sysadmin who knows how to read logs. He smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. Thanks, Alina. As I walked toward the elevators, the doors opened and Chase walked out. He was unrecognizable, no suit, just jeans and a t-shirt. He was carrying a box of personal items. He looked smaller, deflated. The arrogance had been surgically removed by the reality of federal indictments. He saw me. He stopped. The lobby was busy, people leaving, lawyers entering, but for a moment it was just the two of us. The disruptor and the dinosaur. I didn't know, he said again. It was his mantra, his shield against the crushing weight of his own stupidity. Ignorance isn't a defense, Chase, I said. It's a vulnerability. What happens to me now, he asked. He sounded like a child. You go to court, I said. You plead guilty. You probably do some time. Maybe just probation if you cooperate, but you'll never touch a keyboard for a cleared company again. He looked down at his box. It held his world's best boss mug, which he had bought for himself, and a stress ball. I just wanted to make it better, he whispered. You wanted to make it yours, I corrected. There's a difference. I walked past him. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was crisp. The black sedan was waiting. Miller was in the driver's seat. I got in. Where to? Miller asked. Langley, I said. We have a debrief with Tungsten at 1400. Copy that. As we pulled away, I watched the glass tower recede in the rearview mirror. It was just a building, a shell. Inside, people were panicking about quarterly earnings and press releases. But out here in the shadows, the real work continued. I wasn't the compliance lady anymore. I wasn't the gray woman in the cardigan. I was the firewall, and I held the keys. Drive, I said. Miller merged into traffic, and we vanished into the stream, invisible, silent, and absolutely essential. Competence speaks louder than any title. Alina didn't just leave a job, she orchestrated an entire unraveling of corporate arrogance. Real power isn't about snapping orders, it's about holding the essential keys and knowing exactly when to let go. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story.